So while we were meditating, the turkeys were serenading us. Yeah. So, yes, just like that. And so it's mating time, so they're all jealous. Yeah, you see a big display of competition and jealousy. Yeah. So when you get jealous of somebody, think, that's what I look like. Like those turkeys, you know. It's a combination of pride and jealousy. The males swell up their, you know, their feathers. Look how gorgeous I am. Yeah. And then, of course, the next one does it. Oh, I'm jealous of you. You know, you think you're better than me, and I'm going to strut around and show that I'm better than you. Yeah. And meanwhile, the girl turkeys are saying, you guys are such a bunch of turkeys. Leave me alone.
That's who's making all the noise tonight. It was actually the hens. This is the hens' version of, come on boys, what are you waiting for?
Oh.
It's the girls?
This is the girls.
No, I thought it was usually the boys.
What it was is there was a little turkey caught behind the fence and the male were hitting her. And the other turkey, I think they were trying to, and they were just attacking the little one.
Jealousy.
Yeah, so the girls are jealous. I usually look at the girls and they're like ignoring the boys.
Most of the time, but this is definitely hen speak.
Okay. Okay.
And they were also
Well, then that's even more fitting.
Yep.
When you guys get jealous, then think you look like those hen turkeys.
And talk about each other behind our backs.
Exactly. Backbite, that's where you get the expression backbite, isn't it? What the turkeys are doing, literally backbiting. Okay, and not very pleasant, is it? You know? I mean, jealousy, if you are jealous, you are making yourself unhappy. Yeah, it's a very good way. Outside of holding a grudge, it's the next best way to make yourself miserable, is to be jealous. Yeah. Maybe we're going, is Karuna still on that seat?
Yes.
Oh. So,
Should take a picture.
so, you know, just like when the kitties get jealous over something, you know, and the amount of unnecessary suffering that comes because of jealousy, and how stupid we look. We do look like a bunch of turkeys. Yeah, and it's, you know, it's like when you're jealous, you yourself are miserable, but it makes the people around you miserable also. Yeah, it creates a whole very uncomfortable feeling. When I lived in India and Nepal, very often students were jealous of the other students who was going to be closer to the teacher, and there was all this competition, and then pride if you got to be closer, and jealousy if you didn't, and backbiting, and all of this kind of stuff. And it created such a bad atmosphere. Yeah, I mean, really a horrible kind of feeling, so that you wanted to go, I wanted to go see my teachers, but I didn't want to have to endure all these people. Yeah, so of course I was one of them, you know, because they got to do it and I didn't, you know, so I was terribly jealous that they got to do all these things for the teacher and I didn't. I was very jealous until one time Lama said that, you know, he keeps some of the people who are the most difficult the ones that are closest to him. And then I thought, oh, okay. Maybe I'm not in that batch. Okay. But really be on the outlook for it and apply these teachings on emptiness to that situation, you know. Exactly who is it? Who is the other person that I'm jealous of? What is the quality I'm jealous of? Who is the me that is feeling jealous? Yeah, really dig in and examine it. And like I warned, be careful of who you're jealous of because you may become like them. Then you'll see what it's really like. Yeah.
Can I go open the gate?
Can you what?
Go open the gate. They're attacking right now.
If they're attacking somebody, yeah, go do something about it. Okay, so on we go. Okay, so we're on 383, right? So if there were a thesis, absence of the thesis, would an entity be a thesis? But where there is no thesis, what can be the counter-thesis? So this verse I can't say I completely understand. Okay, but it's refuting adherence to theses that fall into extremes and refuting that a non-thesis is a thesis. Okay, so the previous verse said that if emptiness exists, then inherent existence, its opposite, also had to exist, because if a thesis was there, then a counter-thesis had to exist. Okay, so here it seems to be that they're saying that they're taking the other stand, that emptiness is non-existent. You know, the previous one, emptiness was inherent existent, we said no. So now they're saying emptiness is non-existent. Okay, so it's you know, it seems like there's a few different ways of interpreting this verse. So one way, which is actually one of the arguments that has historically been going on with the Madhyamakas, is people saying that the Madhyamakas just refute other people's assertions, but they don't have any theses or assertions of their own. Yeah, so all they do is refute, but they have no system. Yeah, they don't say anything positively. And so this has been an accusation that historically has been going on, people accusing the Madhyamakas like this. Okay, so are they okay now?
Yeah. Well, yes, they are. They're loose. They have.
Okay. So somebody's saying, though you Madhyamakas claim to have no system, the contention that you have no thesis constitutes a system. So saying you have no system is actually having a system. So implicit in the opponent's argument is the assumption that anything that exists is inherently existent. Okay? And so here the commentary really emphasizes that the Madhyamakas themselves never claim to have no system. Yeah, they never claim all we're doing is refuting people's things and we have no system ourselves. Yeah, but they merely assert that emptiness isn't inherently existent. Okay, so that is an assertion, yeah. Okay, so similarly, they don't deny holding views or theses, but they merely deny that their views and their theses exist inherently. Okay, so you see, this is part of the problem. People thinking that if you say emptiness exists, then you're kind of operating in this sphere of nihilism and nothing exists and you don't have any theses and you don't have any assertions. And all Madhyamaka is doing is saying we don't have any inherently existent assertions. Okay? So they do have their own system, they do have their own assertions. 384, how can fire be hot when things do not exist? This was refuted above. It was said that even hot fire does not exist. Okay, so does not inherently exist. So this is refuting proof that there are truly existent things. So isn't it feasible that there's true existence on the grounds that specific functional things do truly exist? Okay, so these guys don't give up. You know, they're saying there are truly existent things because specific things like fire exist. And they truly exist, and that's why they burn us. So Aryadeva says, can fire be inherently hot? Okay, it can't because there aren't inherently existent things. So it can't be inherently or truly hot. So it refers back to stanza 341 that said that even hot fire doesn't exist inherently. So that stanza says, that which is hot is fire, but how can that burn what is not hot? Thus, so-called fuel does not exist, and without it, fire too doesn't exist. Okay, if you remember that verse back then. So fire burns only fuel that is the nature of the other three elements. Okay, yet when the fuel gets hot, it becomes the fire. Okay, and then it is no longer fuel to be burnt. The fuel has become the fire. Okay, so if it is not hot, and it's totally unrelated to, if fuel is not hot and it's totally unrelated to fire, okay, then it can't burn, in which case it's not fuel. If fuel is hot, it becomes the fire, so it still can no longer be fuel, because the definition of fuel is that which is getting burnt in fire, because the fuel has become the fire. So the fuel and the fire are not inherently one, they're not inherently different. Okay, so fuel that's independent of fire doesn't exist. Okay, and fire that's independent of fuel also doesn't exist. Okay, so they're dependent on each other, so thus they can't be inherently existent. But that's an interesting thing to think about, isn't it? That if the fuel were one with the fire, then it wouldn't be fuel. It would be fire. And if it were totally inherently separate than fire, then it also wouldn't be fuel, because it wouldn't be what is getting burnt by the fire. Yeah? Interesting to think about, isn't it? Yeah?
What would you call that kind of relationship of dependency? Is that mutually dependent, or is one the cause of the fuel?
The fuel is the cause of the fire, and they're also mutually dependent. Yeah, they're defined in relationship to each other. Okay, 385. If through seeing things one could refute the statements that things do not exist, who then sees the elimination of fallacies regarding all four theses? So this is refuting the four extremes by reasoning. Okay, so here's somebody is saying, you know, I see fire, so therefore fire truly exists. Okay, so even if by saying fire, you could refute that fire doesn't truly exist. In other words, it truly exists because I see it. It exists because I see it, and therefore it truly exists before I see it. Okay, because I see it. Okay, then who sees the elimination of the fallacies associated with the true existence of oneness and difference, and all those four theses, such as existence, non-existence, both and neither. Okay, so the idea is that the four theses are all flawed. Yeah, something doesn't arise from something that's existent. It doesn't arise from something non-existent. It doesn't arise from both. It doesn't arise from neither. Because you put inherently, you qualify all four of those with inherently. Okay? So it doesn't exist in any of those four ways. So who sees, who sees the fallacies? Who sees the elimination of those fallacies? In other words, who can prove that those four theses exist? So the Madhyamakas are throwing back to these people, that if there's inherent existence, then there should be somebody who sees the reasoning that counteracts their reasoning. Okay? Or you should be able to find somebody who is able to put forth a reasoning that proves inherent existence. Okay? But you can't find somebody who can who can refute the fallacies in the arguments of the proponents of true existence. Okay? There's double negative in here, so fallacies is one thing, and then refute the fallacies, and it gets confusing that way, okay? But it's basically saying, who can, we're refuting those four theses, who can refute our refutation? That's what it's essentially saying. So nobody can. Then 386, where there is nowhere, even in particles, here the tiniest particles, a truly existent entity, how can it occur? Even for Buddhas, it does not exist. Thus, it is irrelevant. Okay? So this is about even the smallest particle of true existence cannot be observed. Okay? So as in verse 305, which says, this also applies when one examines whether particles have parts. First we refuted the whole, saying that it had parts, and something that had parts isn't truly existent because it depends on its parts. So even the parts have parts. Okay, so it's applying that also to the particles, the tiniest particles. They also have parts. Okay, so if there were something that were truly existent, we should be able to observe that in the tiniest particles. So this is the idea that, and that we had in the West too, that you just keep dividing things, and then eventually you get to the tiniest particle, and that is inherently existent. The inherently existent building blocks that can no longer be subdivided, that are always there, that don't have parts and can never be broken up. Okay? But even though that we like that idea that you can finally reach something like that, in actual fact you can't, because everything mentally can continue to be subdivided. Okay? So so you can't find inherent existence even in a tiny particle. And so that's why you hear, they say a lot, there's not even an atom of inherent existence. Here's where it's coming from, okay? So, so, and in addition, the Buddhas don't see any inherent existence or any inherently existent particles. So it's wrong to accept as existent that which is non-existent to the Buddhas, because the Buddhas are omniscient, okay? So asserting true existence is unrelated to any kind of feasible statement that you can make, okay? So there's no way to validly assert and prove true existence. These guys keep trying. Okay, here's their next effort. 387, if they are not twofold, how can anything have an existent entity? If that is reasonable to you also, why raise further arguments? So here they're showing that everything is equally free from extremes. Okay, so if there's no twofold division of phenomena into truly existent ones and non-truly existent ones, which there isn't. So don't like, okay, here's your class of phenomena, and instead of being divided into permanent and impermanent, it's divided into truly existent and non-truly. That's ridiculous, okay? So there's no twofold division of phenomena like that, okay? So since there's nothing like that, then what, including particles, could be truly existence, since all forms of true existence have already been disproven? Okay, so we've gone from big to small to in to out. There's no such reserved category of truly existent smallest particles or truly existent emptiness or truly existent permanent things or truly existent impermanent things. All that has been refuted, okay? So if, because of what we've explained, our system that has eliminated the two extremes makes sense to you, why do you cling to true existence and continue to argue against us? Okay? So Aryadeva is saying, come on already. Yeah, either you've got to prove your argument or you've got to give up. But why do you keep asking the same thing again and again, trying to find some way to assert true existence? 388, regarding the non-functional aspect of all things, differentiations are inappropriate. That which is seen in all substantial entities is not differentiatable. Okay, so this is about that it's inappropriate to assert differentiations of true existence and non-true existence with regard to any phenomena. Okay, so same kind of thing. So if any reasoning could disprove emptiness, we would be convinced, because we're reasonable people. Okay, but since true existence can't be proven, you should accept our thesis of non-true existence. Okay, if the nature of all internal and external things were truly existent, they wouldn't depend on causes and conditions. But you yourself see that functioning things depend on causes and conditions. Okay, so also differentiation into truly existent and non-truly existent, that kind of, making into categories is inappropriate with respect to the absence of truly existent things. Okay, so if truly existent things, if there's no such things as truly existent things, how are you dividing them into those that are truly existent and those that are not? Okay, so it's just like there's no differences in the entity of space because there's mere absence of obstruction. Okay, so space is a negative, mere absence of obstruction. Emptiness too, mere absence of inherent existence. Yeah, so we don't make any differentiations between that. Yeah, and this refers back to stanza 191, which was one of the famous ones, that says, whoever sees one thing is said to see all. That which is the emptiness of one is the emptiness of all. So that means that when you've seen the emptiness of inherent existence of one thing through inference, all you need to do is turn your mind to another phenomena and you'll very easily realize its emptiness. You don't need to go through all the arguments and all of this kind of stuff again. Okay? So there's no distinction into true existence and non-true existence with respect to any phenomena whatsoever. Yeah, but it's interesting because, we kind of feel like, okay, there's a person that's me, that's truly existent, that's really me. There's an essence of me-ness, and yet it changes. Yeah? Don't we think that? You know, I mean, that's our gut feeling. There's a real me, and yes, that thing, yes, I change. But those two things are completely, they don't fit together on one basis. Because if things have their own entity and exist, if they exist by their own entity, okay, if they are inherently existent, then it means they don't depend on anything else whatsoever, which means they can't be influenced by other phenomena, which means they can't be changed. Okay, so this is one reason when we talk about Buddha nature, that the naturally existing Buddha nature is the emptiness of inherent existence of the mind. Because when we see that the mind lacks inherent existence, then that helps us to see that the mind can change. Which means it helps us to see that we can become Buddhas. If our mind were inherently existent, there would be no way to improve it, to change it at all. Yeah, and yet our ignorant mind, you know, we feel like, okay, there's some part of me that is truly existent, and at the same time I change. Crazy. Doesn't make any sense. Yeah? It's like we were talking the other day, on one hand we say, my body, as if there was a me that owned the body, and then the other times we say I, referring to the body. So sometimes we think the body's me, and sometimes we think we're the owner of the body. Now you can't be both within true existence. You've got to be one, or you've got to be the other. Okay, well, we want to be both. You know, we definitely want to have our cake and eat it too. Okay. So, okay, so this kind of grasping, you know, there was this kind of grasping at inherently existent I is really the source of all of our suffering, okay? Because we experience suffering by not having the happiness that we think we're going to get by acquiring friends and possessions and status and all these kinds of things. Yeah? Okay, then 389, if owing to non-existence you claim no reply is made to the other's thesis, why should you also not prove your own thesis, which is refuted by reasons? Okay, so this is talking about, you know, the appropriateness of accepting the thesis or the argument for for the emptiness of true existence. Okay, so we say to them, okay, after you analyze, you should either accept emptiness or you should make a reply. You should refute it. And Joe Blow says, it would be suitable to reply if the slightest thing were truly existence. But according to you, everything is non-existent, so how can any reply be made? Okay? So Joe Blow's saying, get off my back because you guys are nihilists and say nothing exists, so how can, you know, I reply to something that doesn't exist anyway? My reply would be non-existent. So Aryadeva says, if you say no reply is made to the Madhyamaka thesis because everything is non-existent, then it would be proper to prove your own thesis. Okay, but your own thesis is refuted by the reasons that prove emptiness. But still, you know, you should be able to prove, if you don't agree with our thesis and you think that we're saying everything's totally non-existent, then you should be able to prove your thesis, but your thesis is refuted by the reasons that prove emptiness. Okay, so since you can't refute another's thesis without proving your own, it's yours that has become non-existent. So since you can't refute Madhyamakas because you think everything, that we're saying everything is non-existent. How about trying to prove your thesis that everything is true existence? Yeah, but your thesis was refuted by all the reasons of proving emptiness. Okay, so give up already. Yeah, what he's saying is if you can't refute our argument and you can't establish your own argument, why are you still holding on to inherent existence? Why don't you just give up and realize that things are empty? 390. Though the world says it is easy to find reasons with which to refute, why can the errors regarding the other's theses not be stated? Okay, so this is about the difficulty of finding a thesis that refutes the emptiness of true existence. So Joe Blow says, even if you're unable to prove your own thesis, everybody knows that reasons that refute others' theses are easy to find. Okay, so Joe Blow is saying to the Madhyamikas, you can't prove your theses, yeah, but everybody knows that reasons that refute other theses are easy to find. So kind of, he's saying, come on, refute our thesis. You know, you can't prove yours, so refute ours. Okay, even though we've done that already. So Aryadeva says, if that's the case, that it's easy to find reasons that refute others' theses, you must have those easily found reasons to refute. So why aren't you able to find the fault in our thesis? Yeah, if finding reasons, if picking faults or other if picking at the faults of other people's assertions are so easy, why can't you pick at the faults of our assertions? Because you're not able to do that, because whatever we do, we are able to undercut it and negate it. Okay? And since you're unable to fault others' thesis, like our thesis, reasons refuting emptiness really aren't so easy to find. Okay? $391. If just by saying they exist, things really did exist, why should they also not be non-existent just by saying they do not exist? Okay? So this is about that you have to have parity in reasoning with respect to, you know, true existence or lack of true existence. Okay, so so if without any reason, just saying that things exist made them truly exist, yeah, then why can't we establish emptiness by saying they don't truly exist? So, you know, they're back to this thing of things exist because I see them, or they could also be saying things exist inherently because I designate them. Yeah, I designate them, therefore they're truly existent, or I see them, therefore they're truly existent. Okay, and so then we're saying, well, if that's the case, then we can make things non-existent by just saying they don't exist. If you can make them inherently existent by saying they exist, we can make them non-existent by saying, you know, or we can make them empty simply by saying they don't truly exist without having to prove our argument at all. Okay, so, you know, therefore, by rejecting the two extremes, we should establish the textual system free from all fabrications that assert the non-existence of the two extremes, free from all fabrications that assert the non-existence of the two, but the two extremes don't exist. I must have written this wrong. Anyway, you should be able to establish the system that is free from all fabrications regarding the ultimate nature of how things exist or don't exist. So free from fabrications such as the two extremes. Okay? And so this is saying, saying you need to be able to establish this by reasoning. Yeah, that neither total non-existence nor true existence exist. You have to establish by reasoning. You can't just say they don't exist. Okay, that doesn't work. Because then you can say anything. Yeah. Isn't there some argument? Isn't that something we used to say to our parents, when we used to bug them? Like, why? And then they say, because I said so. Yeah. And then we said, well, so what?
We didn't like to hear that.
Yeah. And that's the point they're making. You can't end an argument by saying, because I said so. You have to have some good reasons. Okay? Although we often try and do that, don't we? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so 393. If everything is a convention because expressed by ordinary people, how can anything that exists as its own suchness be a convention?
I skip one, then 392.
Oh, did I skip one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, 392. If a thing is not non-existent, if a thing is not non-existent because the term existent is ascribed, neither is it existent because the term existent is applied. So this is the same thing as before, that merely designating something as truly existent will not make it so. Okay, so Joe Blow says, if things don't exist ultimately, the designation things exist is incorrect. Because Joe Blow believes that things exist ultimately. Okay, so he's saying, if things don't exist ultimately, how can you say things exist? The designation things exist is incorrect because they've got to, if they don't exist ultimately, then they can't exist. And so he's saying then it would be like saying that the child of a barren man doesn't exist. That was from Jeffrey, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So if things don't lack true existence because we say the words they exist, then neither are they truly existent because we ascribe the words they truly exist to them. Okay? Calling someone with good eyesight blind, or someone with a short lifespan long-lived, doesn't make it so. Yeah? If things could be accomplished by words alone, it would be just as reasonable to accept that they lack true existence as to think that they are truly existent. Okay? So I think they're implying here, that, Madhyamaka say things exist by being merely labeled, by being merely, designated on the basis of designation. That's what makes them exist. So it seems like Joe Blow is saying, well, if that's the case, then you can call anything anything and make it that. Okay? And this is one of the questions people have. If things exist by name only, by being merely designated in dependence on a basis, then why can't I call this a giraffe? Yeah. And so that's what Aryadeva is saying. It isn't valid to call this a giraffe. If the word giraffe, the sound giraffe, did not have another meaning associated with it, and you needed a word so that everybody would know what to call this, then you could call it a giraffe and it would become a giraffe. Okay. But if the word giraffe already has a meaning associated to it that we've all agreed upon, yeah, then just calling this a giraffe doesn't make it one. Okay.
It reminds me of words that are slang at first and then they get put into the dictionary because everybody kind of agrees on
Yeah,
it.
right, exactly. At first the words are slang and you get a big X with red ink on your English paper if you use them. And then 2 years later they're in the dictionary because everybody's using them. Yeah. But it's also like the Islamic State. Just by calling yourself an Islamic State doesn't make you Islamic and doesn't make you a state. You know, and that's what people are saying. Why does the news keep calling them an Islamic State? Because the Muslims say it's not Islam and it's also not a state. So why do we keep calling it that? I don't know why the press does that. Yeah. Anyway. Now 393. If everything is a convention because expressed by ordinary people, okay, how can anything that exists as its own suchness be a convention? Okay, so according to you, things exist inherently, yeah, we're saying to them, and also they exist as conventions because ordinary people speak of them by means of words that don't touch their entity. The words are, you know, merely labels that don't touch their entity. Yeah. So we're saying to them, according to you, they're truly existent. And they're also conventions that are labeled, but the label doesn't affect the entity of it. But what we're saying to them is, how can anything that exists inherently also be a convention? Okay, because to be a convention means that it is designated, dependent, yeah. Yeah, I wonder why it got the word hiccups associated with this. Who made up that word? Yeah. Yeah. But how can anything that inherently exists be a convention? Because a convention is something that people just use words and terms to talk about, but it doesn't mean that those words and terms make that thing what it is or anything like that. Yeah. But if it existed inherently, it couldn't be a convention. It would have to, you know, exist ultimately. Okay.
They were given a reason on why they think they both can live together? Inherent existence and conventional?
Well, it's something that has to do with a Satantrika assertion. Something that Satantrikas that follow reasoning say that impermanent phenomena are specifically characterized because they are phenomena that must be realized by a mind that takes them as its appearing object through the appearance of their own uncommon characteristics. So remember, specifically characterized things, it has its own uncommon characteristics, which are the appearing object, you know, so they're a specifically characterized thing. Yeah. In contrast to things that are merely imputed, according to Satantrika, that are generally characterized phenomena. Okay? So things that are perceived by direct perceivers are specifically characterized. They have their own entity as that object. Things that are perceived, that are known or that come into existence through conceptual consciousnesses, designating them, like space, or according to this school, past and future things. Then those things, are conventions. Are conventional things. Yeah, so it has something, so somehow these Svatantrikas are saying, so that the specifically characterized things are not objects of terms, since their entities can't fully appear to a conceptual consciousness. Okay, specifically characterized phenomena aren't merely imputed by terms and concepts, but exist from their own side by their own exclusive mode of being. Terms can convey this mode of being, but only via a conceptual appearance, and thus can't evoke them as vividly as experienced by direct perceivers. But at the same time, these Svatantrikas can't say that the specifically characterized things have no relationship to terms, because we use language to talk about them. Yeah. So supposedly everything exists inherently and as conventions, because ordinary people speak about them using words that don't touch their entity. But how can anything that exists inherently be a convention? Okay, because anything that exists inherently could only be ultimately existent. Okay, and if anything existed inherently in and of itself, it should be found by a reasoning consciousness, examining that thing to see if it's inherently existent or not. So it should be found by ultimate analysis. But what do you find when you examine with ultimate analysis?
The emptiness of that thing.
You find the emptiness of that thing. You don't find nothing. You find the emptiness of that thing. Can that thing bear analysis? No. Okay. Yeah. Because if it could, it would be truly existent. You would find that thing when you investigated with ultimate analysis. Okay? Then 394, if things are non-existent because things all do not exist, in that case it is incorrect that all these theses concern the non-existence of things. So Job Lowe is saying, since you deny that things exist inherently, they are non-existent. Here he goes again. The opponent's argument, so what Blow is saying, what he thinks, is that when you negate true existence, you are making things that used to be truly existent become empty of true existence. That's what he's thinking. That things are truly existent, but when you negate their true existence, then you're making them empty. And then, since emptiness is equal to non-existence, you're destroying reality. Okay? So Aryadeva says back, if refuting their true existence makes them non-existent, they would always have been non-existent because they have never truly existed. So he's saying, because this guy's thinking, they're truly existent. You Madhyamikas refute true existence, so you make them empty, but emptiness means non-existent. And we're saying if that were the case, then they always would have been non-existent because they've never been truly existent. And if they've always been non-existent, what in the world are you eating and what are you walking on and, what are all these things around you if nothing exists? Okay? So the ornament of clear realizations says, there's a quote in it, with regard to this, there is nothing to remove, nor is there anything to impose. By viewing reality correctly, when reality is seen, one is released. Okay, so this is regarding dependently arisen phenomena. Yeah, so which means all phenomena. Yeah, dependently arisen phenomena means all phenomena. The self of person and the self of phenomena don't need to be removed from dependently existent phenomena because they've never existed. What's the self of the person?
There's a selflessness of person, but there isn't a self of person. Not inherently existent self of person.
Well,
Me or I.
okay. What's the selflessness of the person? The emptiness of the person. What's the self of the person?
Perception. Non-existent phenomena.
Okay, the word self, yeah, when we say self-grasping, what does self mean in the phrase self-grasping?
It's an existent person.
But if I just say self-grasping, what does self mean there?
Grasping at true existence.
Grasping at truth. So self means
True existence.
true existence. So what's the self of persons?
The true existence of person.
The true existence of persons. What's the selflessness of persons? The non-true existence of persons. Okay. What's the self of phenomena?
The true existence of
Phenomena. Is that the object of negation?
Yes.
Yes. When you realize that the object of negation doesn't exist, what do you realize? The selflessness of phenomena. Okay? So the self of person is the object of negation. It's referring to the true existence of the person. Does that exist? No. Has it ever existed?
No.
Do you make it non-existent by refuting it?
No.
Okay. So, yeah, so this quotation, you know, with regard to this, there is nothing to remove, nor is there anything to impose. By viewing reality correctly, when reality is seen, one is released. Okay? So regarding dependently arisen phenomena, the self of person and the self of phenomena don't need to be removed from the dependently existent phenomena because from the beginning they haven't existed. Do you understand that? Okay. So dependently existent phenomena, this. Okay? So the self of phenomena, which means the true existence of phenomena, does not need to be removed from this gong. Why not? Because it was never there. So when we're refuting something, are we refuting something that exists? No. So does our refutation make something that used to exist become non-existent? No. Okay? So when it says that there's nothing to remove and there's nothing to add, it means on this, there's no inherent existence in here that we have to take out, and there's no selflessness of the gong that we have to add on to it. Because right from the very beginning, there's been no self of the gong, and right from the very beginning, the selflessness of the gong has already been there. So when you refute selflessness, when you refute self, you're not creating selflessness. Okay? Because selflessness has been there all the time. Okay? So when you realize that you're not inherently existent, it's not that you're taking out inherent existence from yourself and you're painting on the selflessness of the person, or you're painting on non-inherent existence.
You're refuting a conceptualization.
Yeah, what does exist is the self-grasping exists. Yeah, the concept of an inherent existent self exists. The appearance of inherent existence exists. The grasping at true existence exists. Does true existence exist? No. Does the grasping at true existence exist?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So sometimes we call the true existence the object to be negated by reasoning, and the grasping at true existence the object that is negated by the path. Because the path is the wisdom consciousness that sees emptiness. That wisdom consciousness removes the grasping. Okay, so in that way it negates the grasping. Yeah. But when we're refuting inherent existence, we're not taking inherent existence away and adding emptiness or adding the selflessness of the phenomena. Okay, what we are doing when we refute inherent existence is we're chipping away at the self-grasping, which does exist because that ignorance that is the root of samsara does exist. Yeah. We're not saying that the ignorance grasping true existence does not exist just because true existence doesn't exist. Okay, the boogeyman doesn't exist. Does the thought of the boogeyman exist? Yeah, and if somebody has the thought of the boogeyman, does that affect their happiness?
Yes.
You bet. Even though the boogeyman doesn't exist, the thought of the boogeyman can make you afraid. Okay? So the boogeyman is the object of negation by reasoning, because it's like true existence. That's what we're using reasoning to refute. By refuting that object, which is the conceived object of the self-grasping, by refuting the conceived object or the apprehended object of the self-grasping, what you're doing is you are removing the self-grasping. Okay, which is what we want to do, don't we? We want to get rid of our self-grasping ignorance. Okay, so it's not that difficult. I mean, just think of the boogeyman analogy. Yeah. If you want to go to sleep and be peaceful, you have to eliminate the idea that there's a monster under your bed. Okay. Is there a monster under your bed? No. Yeah. Does the idea that there's a monster under your bed exist? Yes. Does that idea make you miserable? Yes. Okay. When you use reasoning, or in this case direct perception, to negate that there's no monster under the bed, because you get on your hands and knees and you look up and you only find the cat, or you only find a lot of dust balls because you haven't cleaned it for the last year. Okay. Yeah. You're not taking anything, you're not taking a monster out that used to be there. Okay? But what you are removing is your idea of the monster, and you're grasping at the monster. because that's causing you to be very afraid. So it's interesting when you really think about this. Inherent existence doesn't exist. But our thinking that it exists when it doesn't exist causes us all sorts of misery. Yeah? So, you know, when we begin to get it that like our mind is really out of touch with reality, that things don't exist the way they appear to us, then we think, oh, that's why I have so many problems. Yeah, because I keep seeing monsters under the bed and there aren't any. Yeah. It's like I said the other day, as long as we have anger, we're going to find somebody to be angry at. Yeah, because our anger, you know, and especially our inappropriate attention, yeah, will create enemies. As long as we have that anger and that inappropriate attention that exaggerates the negative qualities of someone, we will find someone with negative qualities that we've exaggerated on them.
And so is this why it's so imperative to use meditation to calm the mind and get to a more subtle level so that we're not seeing all this gross stuff, but it kind of opens up so we can see how things really are existing?
Yeah. Yeah, you have to have some concentration to do that.
That's kind of like the door to...
Yeah. Well, you need concentration, and then you need the analysis.
Mm-hmm.
If you just have the concentration, then you get born in the upper realms.
Yeah.
And then you're still within samsara. So you need the analysis too. Yeah. Okay. So now we're on 395, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm hoping next week we will finish. Okay. Or do you want it? Let's see. Yeah, so let's wait until next week to do that.